Welcome to Midlife Matters. I'm Marie, and each week I'm joined by my friends Julie and Mindy to talk about all the topics keeping women in the middle years up at night. Today we're talking about interracial marriage and family life. Our friend Katee is joining us to share the unique challenges she and her husband have experienced as a couple and as parents of their 3 boys. Join us as we listen and learn from Katee's story. Let's get started. Hi, Mindy.
Hey, Marie.
It's just you and I today because Julie's spending some time with her family.
Yes, I'm so excited for her. She gets to have grandma time too.
Yes, she gets to spend the whole week with her grandson, so I can totally see why she skipped recording today.
Yes, she definitely has a good excuse.
Yes. But we are not actually alone. Listeners, today we're joined by one of Mindy's friends, and we're going to be talking to her about interracial marriage and some of the unique challenges she and her husband have experienced related to that. Mindy, do you want to introduce your friend to us?
Oh, I would love to. All right. I had so much fun coming up with this. My friend Katee, I would describe her as a blonde bombshell from California. She's an esthetician, an ordained pastor, married to Bradley, who was born and raised in Kenya, Africa, and came to the U.S. for college. They have 3 beautiful boys ranging in age from 12 to 6. She has also been referenced on this podcast as my hug from the Lord after moving to Pennsylvania 2 years ago. She and I immediately became best friends over our love for Jesus and our love for making fun of the boot camp instructor. Our families met shortly after that, and they really have been one of the happiest things to happen to us here in Pennsylvania. So Katee, welcome to Midlife Matters.
Thank you so much. I'm so honored and so excited and also very humbled to be here today.
We're so excited to have you, and we're really looking forward to hearing your story. I know that there's been a lot of conversations about race in our culture lately, and we just thought that getting your perspective would be something that our listeners would benefit from.
Thank you so much. I mean, honestly, when Mindy first texted me, it was really scary, and I felt like it was really risky, and it was almost too painful to really actually relive and go kind of remember all of the disrespect and dehumanization that has really happened to my family over the years and to my friends. So yeah, it definitely brings up a lot of emotions. It can bring up a lot of anger and conflict talking about race. And yeah, I mean, honestly, I don't like those emotions. So it's hard to have to process those things, and you want to forgive people and move on. And so it's really hard to dig back down and kind of relive some of those stories. But I started to pray about it, and I felt right away the Lord telling me, yes, for such a time as this, like Daniel and Esther and Joseph, but I had one more out. So I thought I would talk to my husband, and he's pretty protective. So I thought for sure he would say no, but he said a resounding yes, and told me to keep praying about it. And so I took a day and I just fasted and I prayed, and I just kept feeling the Lord saying yes. And so then I even went and I called my Black friend, who's a mother of 4 boys. She has 4 Black children. And I just thought maybe she has, I don't want her to be offended that I would say in any way as a white person that my story was more, that I hadn't gone through any more suffering than she had, or my point of view. And she just gave me her resounding blessing also. And that was really important to me, to just know that she was so happy that I would stand up and fight for her. And I had another friend who'd been in the first protest in Philadelphia, and she had called me and said, when it started to get chaotic at the protest, there was a chant that started coming out saying, white women come to the front, to come and line up between the police officers and the Black men and women. And she said all the white women came and stood in between and linked arms and formed a wall between people. And in one sense, I was like, yes, that's so beautiful. I want to be that person. But in the second sense, I thought, how broken that I have to be that person, because no one's going to shoot me, this blonde, blue-eyed girl. No one's going to take a gun to me. So I can literally be a wall of protection between the police and my husband. But I also want to be that, because we do live in a broken world. So we need to adjust.
We have talked a lot about this, Katee, since we've met, even over the past 2 years. These conversations have come up, and I love your heart on this.
I'm just hoping that today that I can really offer some grace in this whole situation, because none of us are really perfect. And we really want to try to learn. And if we're so afraid and we're so fearful that we don't know what our voice is, that we don't really listen and we don't educate ourselves, then we don't really make change. So I just really want to have a voice that really gives, especially white privileged people like myself, some grace to go on a journey together through this.
Yeah. Well, we're looking forward to hearing your perspective. Why don't we start out with where you grew up and how you first met your husband, Bradley? We'd love to hear about your dating and what made you fall in love.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, my story kind of starts a little bit earlier, I think. I grew up, just for context, I grew up in a really small white surfer town, Santa Cruz, California. And to the north of us, we had some more diversity in the Asian community. And to the south, there was like a Hispanic community. But my community was really very white. But we had a youth leader at our church. I grew up a Christian. I grew up in a great church that was very missions oriented, which I'm so thankful for. And we had a youth leader who was from Zimbabwe, and she had this orphanage. And so she would tell stories to us about it. And something just really ignited in my heart. And I was like ready to go and wanted to go to and work at the orphanage with her in Zimbabwe. And so when I graduated high school, I really started praying about where I was supposed to go. And I just knew I wanted brown babies so bad, however they would come to me. That was like just this passion that I had. I even wrote a letter when I was 13 to my future husband saying that, I don't know what color you are, but I will have brown babies. And so whether we need to adopt them or not, that's like happening. I recently found the letter and was able to give it to my husband. So that was pretty special. But anyways, I didn't end up going to Zimbabwe. I really felt that the Lord was telling me to stay and go to junior college. And then eventually I ended up going to do a church plant when I was 21 to Boston, Massachusetts with a group of really close friends. And that's where I met my husband. And so when I first met him, he came in and I thought, oh my gosh, he's so cute and he's so African and I love that. And then I thought, yeah, I really can't like someone just because they're Black. And he's later told me that he's totally fine with that, that's fine, that I can like him just because he's Black. But yeah, so we served together in church for about 2 years, and there's so many stories, but I was trying to cut it down because I wanted to focus on some of the specific things that, just we've experienced in our story of racial injustices, I guess I would say. So after we started dating, I remember the first time we sat down to go to church and we were worshiping, and the drummer just stared us down as we sat next to one another. He stared Bradley down, and it was so intense. But I remember he got up and he didn't even want to come back to church after that. And I also that was one of my first, I would call it one of my first white privilege moments, because I just had to ask him, are you sure? I know this guy, he's kind of weird sometimes, but he loves God and he worships. Are you sure that he was really doing that? And he was like, yeah, he was sure. But I think in that moment, I've relived and I've said that moment. And I think as white people, we say that all the time. But what that really does is I was making my boyfriend question his sanity and making him think you're asking one of the things we have to do, first of all, is believe our friends when they talk to us, to believe people's stories, because when you're always saying are you sure? It's really confusing, it's not affirming or validating at all. But anyways, we did continue to go to that church, and Bradley, of course, just continued to pray forgiveness and blessing on that man, which honestly, changed my life just in that one little thing, because that people have to do that all the time. We talk about as Christians loving your enemy and loving those who persecute you and laying down your life for another. And if there's anyone who knows how to do that, it's the Black community, because they have to over and over and over and over again with all of us who maybe have good intentions, but in our white privilege are oblivious to some of the things that are really painful. So so that was one of my first moments. One of my second moments was we were walking in the street in Boston, and there's actually two incidents. We were walking down the street in Boston. The first time we weren't holding hands, and we just there was Black people and white people. This was in 2004. And they were just we just got some really mean and dirty looks. Enough so that I started to feel a little this is dangerous. And so did Bradley. And so we left that area. And then I think that was another moment where I realized, what am I getting myself into? I just love my boyfriend. I just want to walk through the street and hold his hand and swing and dance and skip, which turns out he's not a skipper. So he doesn't He does not do that with me, but I have gotten him to hold my hand.
There's still time, Bradley. You can start skipping.
There's still time. I know it's there. I believe it. I hold on to it. But the second time we were walking down the street while we were dating, there was just this one man in particular who really was mad dogging us as we went down the street. And at this point, Bradley and I had talked and prayed about it a little bit, but we're still like, what does it mean? I think our initial response is like, I don't want to cause people offense. I don't want to hurt Black people's feelings by me, this white woman dating this Black man. I don't want to hurt, I don't want to bring hate and conflict. Like, I hate that,
Right.
Mm-hmm.
And so we're trying to process it. But that second time, Bradley just had a moment where he said he just knew that the Lord was telling us that us walking together and holding hands down the street was our peaceful protest that we could do throughout our entire marriage, of just showing the world a picture of what heaven is supposed to look like, of how we're supposed to be in this relationship with each other that's hand in hand and side by side. And so whatever people felt when they saw us, whatever hate might have come up in their heart, that's really the Holy Spirit convicting them of something that they need to think about and that they need to go back and reflect on. And we can only hope that they do, and we can only pray that they will. And what's so exciting, I believe, about this moment is it looks like people finally are. People are really starting to take a look and see, like, why do I feel this way? Why do these emotions come up in me? Or why have I been totally oblivious to this line of suffering when it's been happening for 400 years? And we've been talking about it for a long, long time.
Well, it sounds like there were quite a few maybe negative feelings that you got from strangers as you went out into the world with your dating relationship. But what kind of reaction did you get from your family and friends?
Yeah, I'm really, really thankful for the reaction I got from my family and friends. His family, Bradley, before he proposed, he went to Kenya for 2 weeks before I got there, just to prepare his family for this white blonde girl who was going to be coming into their family. And I'm actually really thankful because one of his dad's brothers, he has like 11 brothers, his dad has a huge family, and he's actually had married a white woman in college here in Massachusetts. And so she has lived in Kenya for the last 40 years. And so I know, and plus years, and that really paved a way for them to know what an interracial relationship would look like. And so that was really, I know that it was way easier for me because I have that aunt and uncle that, really paved the way before me. But his family's amazing and they're just incredible. And I think my family knew that was probably going to happen because I was so obsessed with Africa from a young age. And so I think my mom was just so happy about how protective Bradley was, because she knew that I was a bit of a loose cannon, because I was just like ready to go run down streets and grab people in the inner city and love on them. And, I see someone with dogs and chains and tattoos and dark skin, and my natural tendency is like, I want to be your best friend. So it's not like a normal tendency for most people. What they see as scary, I see as like, oh my gosh, you probably have the biggest heart of love. So I know that my mom was like, thank God someone's going to knock some common sense into this girl. By which meaning, not that I should be afraid of those Black men, but the verse I just keep thinking of is, to be as wise as a serpent and as innocent as a dove. And when we, you have a heart for these kind of this issue, that's really so important as we go about protesting, as we go about wanting to make a difference, is you really do need to be as wise as a serpent and as innocent as a dove, because that's a hot topic and it can bring up a lot of things. But I had to read you this verse. This is the pastor in me, because I just thought this is so beautiful. It's in Revelations 7:9-12. And it's a picture of heaven. And I was thinking about it. We pray all the time the Lord's Prayer, may your will be done on earth as it is in heaven. And we pray that all the time in white churches and Black churches all over the place. But what the Bible says heaven looks like is it says that, behold, a great multitude that no one could number, from every nation, from all tribes and peoples and languages, standing before the throne, before the Lamb, clothed in white, with palm branches waving in their hands, crying out with a loud voice, salvation belongs to our God who sits on the throne and to the Lamb. And that's incredible. That's the heaven that we're supposed to be bringing down to earth. That's what it's supposed to look like. Like when a Black person dies, they don't go to a different heaven than us. We all go to the same place. So we need to figure out how to do that together. So back to my family's experiences. We definitely only recently have dived into some of these more difficult conversations with my family. I think honestly, one of the things Bradley says is like, it's like as white people, we think we're living in Disneyland, and it's like when you got to tell them, no, you're not at Disneyland anymore. It's a little sad, because you see people that are, we have good hearts. People have good hearts and they have a lot of love for my family and for, not everyone is this racist. I think that term is so challenging. Like even, it's coming out like, if you're white, you're racist. And I stand by that. But I think the terminology with it is really that's not the end of the story. It just so happens that because of our white privilege, we don't, we're desensitized to an alienation of another people group. And so we need to learn about it. And I'm still definitely learning about it and repenting, and asking for forgiveness and making mistakes just with the whole COVID thing, wearing a mask. I mean, this was like such a dumb thing. The other day was, we need to wear masks in the stores now. And so Bradley had to go get gas. So I'm like, oh yeah, here's a red bandana. And I tossed it to him and he was just like, seriously, Katee, you want me to come home? And I was like, right. What? He's like, you're going to send me, a black man, out to the store in a red bandana. I'm going to get shot. We had a leadership meeting. We pastor a church with 2 other interracial couples. And, when that came out about wearing the mask, I mean, total supporter of doing it. Like, yes, wear masks. But it was a really hard conversation, not for one that you think, but because of just the racial profiling that happens for, they don't know that he's getting gas to mow my lawn so that my boys can play soccer. Like they just see big scary man in a mask. He's going to rob my store. And so, I mean, that's just a little instance of how, my white privilege, I don't have to worry about that. I throw on a mask and I'm good to go,
Well, I know you and Bradley are just such an encouragement, and Bryce and I love every moment that we have with you guys. And you also are very intentional, not only as pastors, but just as people, about encouraging the next generation, encouraging everybody that's around you. I'm curious though, Katee, like, did you and Bradley have good pre-marriage counseling? I know that you guys do pre-marriage counseling for other couples.
Yeah.
And you especially have probably good advice, especially for couples that are interracial as well, that are kind of walking the same road as you. What are some things that maybe you learned during your counseling, or what's some advice that you would give a couple that is entering in this type of relationship?
Yeah, absolutely. We definitely talked about we had a major cultural difference as well as being black and white. And so we definitely talked about that. I think one of the things that's really special about being an interracial relationship is your differences are so very obvious. And so sometimes people that, 2 white people that grew up in the same neighborhood, they might not realize how different they really are and can have a lot more, clashes in a way because they don't realize how much they need to communicate about it. But I think for us, it was obvious from the very beginning, like, yes, communication is like very key to our relationship because we are so obviously coming from such different worlds. Every day we can look at each other and know like, yeah, you're not the same as me. So I need to ask more questions. So in marriage counseling, to answer your question, they did talk to us a lot about love languages and all of that. But one of the verses that they really talked about that I think is crucial that we share with our couples that we've counseled, and actually most of the couples we've counseled have been interracial, is that really the Bible verse that talks about husbands, love your wives like your own body, and women, respect your husbands. And there's just instruction in that verse there that, it can be so twisted sometimes in our culture, but the intent of that instruction is, men and women, with those 2 things, with respect and love, those are the hardest things for us to give one another. And when just being disrespectful and feeling unloved can be the source of almost every fight and pain that you have in marriage. Man feels disrespected and woman feels unloved. It's a painful cycle if it's not worked on. In an interracial marriage, you have to hold those things even more close to your heart, because if my husband is disrespected out in the world all day and all night and all the different activities that he does, then I do something at home that's not honoring or dismissive to who he is or the things that he wants. It feels a lot bigger because I'm supposed to be that safe place. I'm supposed to be the one that knows and understands him. And I'm pretty sure it happens the same way when it's a white husband and a black wife, where she needs to really feel that love, and that needs to be a safe place for her. So I know that that's an issue across the board in marriages, but it just has that extra layer of sensitivity to it. even at restaurants, I'm a pretty bubbly, bright person and I like to smile and chat up a waiter, but I know that I need to basically look at my plate or the waiter won't even talk to my husband. And he feels really disrespected about that. So I know that I have to really tone myself down so that the waiter will take the order from my husband. I mean, that can really ruin a date. You went out to the restaurant to have a nice time. And the first moment my husband just completely disparate. I mean, it's almost every time we go out to dinner. So I have to I fold my hands and I just look at my plate because otherwise they will try to get my attention and he's sitting right there.
Right.
It's pretty silly. Yeah, I had one more story I have because this one's my favorite about Bradley's family. And just because I feel like it's one of the things I really want to come across in this podcast is race can feel so difficult and so challenging to understand. But I feel like if you talk to a child who has not yet gone to preschool, but is about 3 years old, you really get a way and a language to talk about race because they totally know how to do it. They are not yet marred by the brokenness of this world. And
right.
So when we were going to a birthday party and Bradley's brother has 2 little girls and his wife, African-American. So their mom was African-American. Their family. So this little girl, she was in Baltimore, grew up in mostly a Black community. I was one of her first white people she really knew. And we're at their family's birthday party and she came up to me and I was pregnant with my oldest son. And she said, Auntie Katee, is my cousin going to be pink like you? And I said, well, I don't know. Maybe he's going to be kind of brown like Uncle Bradley and maybe a little bit pink like me. And she's like, no, I don't think so. I think he's definitely going to be pink like you. So I was like, all right, let's see what happens, And so once I had my oldest son, they came over to visit and to meet my baby. And so she sees that he is in fact brown and not pink. And so she asked to go to the potty. So I'm taking her upstairs to go to the potty. I'm holding her little hand and we're walking up the stairs and she looks at me and she says, so you're still pink, huh? And I said, yep, I'm still pink. And I think she thought maybe I was going to change or because I had a brown baby, maybe my skin color, I would mature into being a brown person or something, And then she got kind of quiet, feeling really sorry for me that I was still pink. And then she was like, well, your hair is nice though. I was like, awesome. Thank you. Thanks for that. She was trying to make me feel a little bit better about myself. I mean, kids can see crayons in a coloring box, they know what color is. And we teach them to talk about their hair color and their eye color. And why can't we just throw it in? I mean, I have all piles of stories about that for later.
Right.
Yeah, that was just that moment into his family. I totally want to be pink. Yes, let's be pink. That's better. I like it. Just in my experience of learning what it would be like to be in an interracial relationship, I think really, really came to the core and the foundation of that love and respect, I got from my marriage counselors. But I think the day-to-day understanding of what it would look like really came when I moved to Philadelphia. We moved here after we had been married about 6 months. And we started going to a church in the inner city. And we met up with 2 other interracial couples. And one of the couples, they were a young couple, same phase of life, just having their first kids. And I mean, we would stay up till 2 or 4 in the morning, at least once or twice a week for years. And a lot of those entire conversations would be about race and would be about our experiences and how to think about our children and how to process life and how to let things go. And but I mean, all the time, I think I remember at one point thinking gosh, we talk about race a lot. I mean, what a white privilege thing to say, because it's every moment of every single day that you're confronted with it. And so I'm just so thankful for having a community. Our church is just really diverse, but someone told me, well, we're actually not that diverse. We're all interracial practically.
Right.
But, it really is helpful to have a friend that you can talk to. And one of the reasons why I think I was even nervous to come on to this podcast was because you really only share these stories with those people that are like that because they understand and they won't question your story.
Mm-hmm.
So,
right.
So it's exciting that we're in a new time.
Sounds like you've had some great experiences in Philadelphia and you started your family there. And you talked about that you had your first child, but now you have 3 sons. Is that right?
Yes, I do. I have 3 boys. My oldest son is 12 and he's in 7th grade, and he is incredibly handsome and smart, and he loves to read and make up stories. He's super social and he loves his friends, and he's really deep waters. He's super insightful. He's a really good big brother, and he tries to help his brother do the right things. Super bossy sometimes. We have to keep him in check, but his heart's usually in the right place.
Yeah.
But he's very, very passionate about people and about justice, and he'll definitely go to battle for people. My middle son is 9, and he's just finishing 3rd grade, and he has huge curls on top of his head and a very, very big smile. And he's got a really big and sensitive heart, and he is just like a discerner of feelings and emotions, and he can totally read the room, and he's actually a really good communicator. He, like little boys, 9 years old, he loves soccer, and he loves watching it. He loves playing video games about soccer, all the things. This particular topic has probably been the hardest for him because I feel like he understands the pain so much, but he loves the Bible, and he asks incredible questions that are so deep that you think, how does a 9-year-old process this about God's word? But he's in it. He's doing his devotional every single morning. My youngest son he's 6 years old, and he's finishing kindergarten, and he's wacky and he's quirky, and he has like basically no front teeth anymore. And I have to cut up food for him to eat it because it's just like he has an empty mouth. And he can play outside for hours with a stick and a rock and be like completely entertained.
That's awesome.
Yeah. So those are my kids.
I love your sons. My boys love playing with them.
Yeah.
And I am curious though, can you just be honest with us about situations you've had to carefully navigate with being a white mom to 3 mixed boys? I'm curious, have they been victim of any negative bias solely based on their skin color? I'm curious about any concerns that you've had for their future. Just the conversations that you and Bradley have had with bringing 3 mixed boys into the world.
Yeah, I mean, there are so many. It could fill a novel, which I wrote down in my notes, but I was trying to think of the most obvious ones. And I mean, I think what's shocking for a lot of white friends to find out is how young it really starts. And for me, my first incident was when my oldest son was 4 years old, and it was his first moment in preschool, his first time away from us. You know, you're feeling like he's getting entered into society. And it was during the All About Me section of school, and they were working on projects. And then they invited the parents to come in and see them. So I walked in, and there were all these little foil mirrors with faces that the kid had used construction paper to make, like with hair and eyes and their skin. And I was looking on the wall, and all I could see was this sea of white faces. And I knew that my son was the only Black kid in the class, but like, where was his picture? So I asked my son where his project was, and he pointed it out to me, and he was a white face. And I about lost my mind. I mean, I had to go to the car, gather myself together, because I knew like this is so not, I don't know what is going on, but what happened. So I went back and talked to the teacher as I asked my oldest son to like stand aside. And I asked the teacher, like, why does my son have a white face? I don't understand. And she said, well, he's the only Black child in class, and I didn't want him to feel bad about having a brown face. So I just gave him the white skin color paper like everyone else. I didn't want him to feel bad about standing out and being different. And I mean, I had to send up a prayer. Like, I'm not a flipper offer, but like, I've never wanted to flip someone off in that moment. But what I also know is that she's a good person, as we like to say. And I know that she loves my son, and she's, you know, I like her. So like, what the heck was that?
Right. Mm-hmm.
And I just had to tell her, like, for starters, told her my son's going to be the only Black person in the room all the time. This is not going to be an only experience that he's going to have. He is different than other people, and he has eyes. He is brown, and that needs to be celebrated, and not his first entrance into the world that his skin color is embarrassing and shameful, and he should morph it into a white person's skin color because he doesn't want to stand out. And so I told her that. She apologized profusely, and I forgave her, and I really told her, though, that if my kid ever came home without brown construction paper or without a brown crayon coloring his stick figure, like she was going to have like a whole lot of trouble. And part of me thinks I was able to have that conversation and be heard with her because I was white. Like if I was another angry Black mom yelling at the teachers for the injusticeness of the white racial curriculum that's in pretty much all of our schools, I don't know if I would have been heard and received as well as I was. So, I mean, I really feel like we got to think about these all about me units. It's such a perfect time to talk about skin color, you know, like, but I think the same thing, especially as Christians, we want to say, and you hear it all the time, you know, but I don't see color. And I think the heart there, what you're trying to say is that you celebrate color, and it's very different. And like, it's very different. You know, I know that my most recent family member who expressed that to me, that she loves my children and that she loves me and my husband, like she would die for us. But when you say that, what you're actually saying is, I celebrate color because you see it, you know,
right?
My sons see that they're brown and they should be celebrating that. So I think if there's something, a little takeaway anyone could know is like, you know, if someone asks you like about your stance or what it is, it's really, the statement is I celebrate color like any little 2-year-old or 3-year-old wants to celebrate it. And so that is a very different message than I don't see it, because that just means that I have to hide or that it's shameful or secretive and I shouldn't be talking about it, which is the message that has gone out loud and clear from really genuine, nice people. And so I think that, that's important.
Like you said, you could write a book about the situations that you've been through, but maybe just give us a story about something now as your boys have gotten a little bit older, maybe conversations you've had to have with them that maybe a purely white family would never have to have.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, for starters, we have to tell our son that he can't wear his hood up. You know, he can't wear a hoodie. He can't wear a black hoodie with his hood up when he goes into grocery store, when he walks down the street. And we have to tell him that he has to keep his hands out of his pockets, that he needs to smile. He has to look at people in the eye. He has to be respectful and calm, and that his life depends on those things. It's not like, just be a good boy. Like, no, you have to do it because the risk is too high. And that doesn't make a lot of sense to a 7-year-old kid, you know, but it's like you already have to teach him these things. And more recent conversations was at the beginning of this year, my son's in 7th grade. I had a gifted, the gifted meeting with the teachers about his challenge classes and stuff like that. And at the end of it, the vice principal pulled me aside and said he just wanted to know how my son was doing because he's been kneeling at the national anthem. And he thought that the school was, you know, really diverse and pretty happy. I mean, this is the white principal and really accepting. And so, like, was there any way that he was, you know, feeling any racial things at school? And I just said, well, I mean, if he's kneeling, then he's clearly feeling some racial things at school. I didn't know what it was. I said, well, you know, let me talk to my son and see, you know, what exactly it is that's going on. And so I went home and I told my husband first what had happened, and what he told me later. His first thought that went through his mind when he found out that my son had been kneeling during the national anthem was, oh my gosh, someone's going to bash his head into a toilet. That was my husband's first thought for my 12-year-old son, kneeling because he was definitely feeling things that are in the air. And words that are being said. And so we had to pull my husband aside. We had to pull my son aside and talk to him. And honestly, I was a little nervous to share this story because the symbol of someone kneeling before a flag has become a Black person kneeling before a flag. It's become such a toxic symbol that's so misunderstood and that's basically what we had to tell my son. Is his heart, his naive, idealist heart that wants to stand up for racial injustice that he's feeling. It was like that symbol has become so toxic. People now think you're talking that you don't love your country or you don't love soldiers or, you know, I mean, one of the kids through my youth group, he's a Marine. Like he got to give this, like, we are for veterans and for soldiers. That wasn't what that symbol was about. And that wasn't what my son was trying to do. But just knowing that's that wise as a serpent, as innocent as a dove, like this symbol is not helpful in this moment of time, especially at the beginning of the year. The beginning of the year environment was not the same as it is right now, you know? So, and so we had the conversation. My husband said, you know what, right now it's just too dangerous. You need to finish 7th grade. science, math, English. Like, we just need you to graduate. I can't have you dead on the floor in the bathroom because of this right now. So then later I kind of thought, well, and we asked him, like, what specifically are you feeling? But he's a 12-year little boy, and he's like, I don't know. It's like, it's fine. I saw the football players doing it. And, and I didn't really get a lot out of him. But during quarantine, we have a lot more time for deep conversations with one another. And actually because of this podcast, really. So I'm very, very thankful. I went back and I just sat down and asked him, like, if he could share with me any specific things, in his older years and experiencing in school, and if he had felt it. And at first he was kind of like, no, Mom, I can handle it. And I just knew, what do you mean you can handle it? Like, what does that mean? So I kept asking a few more questions, and he started talking a little bit more freely. And he shared that there's a group of white kids that they freely and very publicly make a lot of Asian and Hispanic racial jokes, but it's like they know they shouldn't really make Black jokes, comments, stuff. They're like a little bit more afraid of what the Black kids might do to them if they say something. But he's like, I also know that if you're making Asian jokes and Hispanic jokes, then you're certainly making Black jokes behind my back. He would walk up and there could be a lot of shushing and stuff like that. But he said in one particular moment, there was a group of kids in the hallway, and they started talking about how it was so racist that they couldn't say the N-word. And these are white kids, and they're saying, it's so racist that we can't do that. It's our right to say that word as much as we want to. And so they said, let's just see what happens. So as they went over near him, he said they were purposely not like saying it to him or at him. They just wanted to say the word around him. And he's so insightful. He's like, I knew that they wanted to get some rise out of me, Mom. And so they just started chanting the N-word around him. And he's like, I said, well, what did you do? And he said, I just handled it, Mom. Like, I handle it. I shrugged my shoulders and I was like, whatever. And I just walked away. And I was like, my heart just broke. And he's like, Mom, no, I'm fine. And I was like, no, you're not fine. Yeah. I think all of me, it's abuse, Right. He shouldn't have to hear that word, and he shouldn't have to be there and be hated for the color of his skin. But I think I just thought it's like a woman who's being, violently abused at her home, and she just handles it. And she's like, yeah, and I'm strong because I handle it. But it's like, no, you shouldn't have to put up with that at all. That's not what this is supposed to look like. So I think more than ever, I understand why he was kneeling. And maybe, our conversation, as we talk about different ways of protesting and different symbols and stuff like that we need to talk about with our kids, definitely want to take our boys to a peaceful protest. And, besides just our one that we do around the neighborhood all the time when we walk, I think that those are hard conversations, though, to have with your son. They're hard conversations. I think one of my most shocking stories about just the reality of kind of the times that we live in is a few years ago, we had a really bad storm and our basement was flooding very, very quickly. And so we got the 3 boys, put them in the car. My husband and I, ran over to the local Home Depot. And my husband told me, stay in the car with the boys. I'll run out and get the trash pump so we could rent it. And so he goes into the store and he comes back out, and I could just tell, like, his whole face was like, just shut down. And he got in the car and was like, and I said, well, where's the trash pump? He's like, the guy won't let me rent it. Totally not okay. He could barely talk about it. He's like, we just have to get our house fixed. So we left the Home Depot, went to like 3 other stores. No one else had the trash pump. So we had to go back to that Home Depot. And of course, I asked him the question, are you sure that he was being racist? Right. If we could just stop saying that. I know I have to stop saying that. And he said, yes, Katee. He's like, I'll prove it to you. Go into the store and rent the trash pump. I'll stay in here with the boys. So I was like, okay. So I go into Home Depot. I go up to the man behind the counter and I see the trash pump. It's right there behind him. And I say, hey, can I rent the trash pump? And he says, oh, absolutely. I was so shocked. I said, well, are you sure? Is it like broken? Is it damaged? And he's like, nope. I said, was it recently broken or damaged? Like, did you just fix it? And he's like, no, it's been in great condition all week. And I said, great, then let me rent it because my house is flooding. So I rented the equipment and he asked me, he's like, oh, would you like me to help you take it to your car? And I said, absolutely. That would be great. So he picks it up and he brings it out and he opens the trunk in my car and he just sees my husband and my boys in the car. And I just slammed the door shut and was like, yeah, okay. And I got in the car and we just left because you're just like, we are trying, our house is flooding. Like, can we just rent the trash pump? Like, our money is good as your money, And he saw me and he's helping me to my car. He's bending over backwards to help me do it. And he wouldn't even give it to my husband. And I just, I've had people ask me about that story and say, well, did you call the news? Did you call? Did you do something? And I think, you have to do your life. And so, like, our house was flooding more so because we had to drive around for the extra hour trying to find the pump, And so it's like you're trying to live your life and you're trying to also forgive and forget some of these stories because you can't just live in the outrage and in the bitterness for so long. And so I think that for me is a really important moment because it really made me stop questioning my husband about, like, do you really think it is? Because it's really the same thing as a woman. You walk into the room and you know that there's that creepy guy and he doesn't have to say anything. He doesn't have to do anything. You just know, like, yeah, I'm not going to stick around that guy because it's weird and something's off. And so I think for me that was helpful. Like, that's the feeling. And I just have to trust my husband's discernment because he knows a lot more than I do that that's what's happening.
Yeah. I mean, that seems like such a shocking story. And I think a lot of our first reactions would be, oh, are you sure? But I mean, it was proven by you going in there right afterwards. And that's really sad. And I'm sorry that happened. And I know that as we listen, that's just not something we can say. Was he imagining it? He obviously wasn't.
Yeah.
There has been progress, but there's still so much progress to do. Yeah. What do you see happening that people are doing right? And what other things should we be doing?
Yeah, no, that's a really great question. I think for me is that people are really listening. I mean, I think it's you guys asking me to share the story. That's what people are doing, right? Mm-hmm. People are willing to listen for the first time ever. And honestly, I mean, here's my pastor self coming on again. I just can't stop thinking of Exodus. Like, I think what's so hopeful about this moment is it feels like it's a moment of deliverance. And I just, if we think we laugh like, oh my gosh, it's like thing after thing, first it's coronavirus and we're quarantined. And then, like we have, but it's like, these are the plagues that had to come before freedom. Like, I'm not sure if everyone would be listening the way that they're listening if we hadn't first all experienced our rights being taken away from us in some way, So it's exhausting and it's so difficult to relive. And like I said before, what's so important about this journey is you need to have grace and forgiveness, and you need to forget things so that you can have relationship with people. And so, and with your, you can't bring that all up all the time. And so I think what's so unique, though, is my family reaching out. And I think also one thing that was so special was my middle son's teacher called me, and it makes me want to cry. It was so sweet. We wept together on the phone, and she just told me that she loved my child and she thought he was incredible. And if there was anything he ever needed, or any of my children as they went through their school system, that they could come and talk to her and that she would be an ally and that she would stand beside them. And I mean, that was above and beyond what a teacher might need to do. And I think in that moment, it was so special. Yeah. And I was able to sit my boys down and tell them, you can always go to this teacher. I know that she is there for you. She will believe your stories. She will hear you. And, you can be safe with her. If something happens on the bus, which there's a lot of bus stories that we don't even have time for, that you can talk to her and she'll believe you. So I think that was really important. Another thing that people are doing is they're teaching their kids. And again, I guess as a mom, we know how important it is to teach our kids because, like the Bible says, when you teach it to them when they're young, they won't go away from it when they're old. And one of my white friends out in California, she called me she was revved up. I thought she was going to tear the roof off the place. I'm like, it's okay. I had to calm her down. Because she loves my family and she loves my children. She loves our son. Our sons have a Zoom call relationship across the country. And she had her son, and she's been teaching them, not just now in this moment, but for a lot of years, about his white privilege, and that, she requires him to make him have someone always go in front of him in line. And she says, it's one of those things I want him to always do, is that him as a white man, that he always puts someone in front of himself so that he knows that he can use his advantage for good and that he's not first in line. He can never be first in line. He has to let someone go in front of him. And so things like that are huge, and people are doing that. And I think just little things. We were talking with we had at church, we were having a online church and just giving everyone, we have a fairly Black church and a interracial church, and just giving everyone a chance to express their feelings and their emotions so that we can just share empathy with them. And, you know, when you just hear all these Black men and women share their stories, it's devastating. But also what I am so challenged by over and over is their desire to love and to put it aside and to build and to go forward. And I think that one of the Black pastors said that, you know, his mom taught him when he was little that he had to say sorry and that then he had to say, I forgive you. And he said, I didn't want to do that when I was little, you know. I don't want to say forgiving. I certainly didn't mean it at the time when he said it, when he was a little boy. But, you know, now when he needs that lesson the most, he says, I can only remember that I have to say, I forgive you, because there is something so powerful, you know, as Christians, especially, like, this is our moment. Like, at our core, we lay our life down for another. That is the definition of love, you know, like, that is what Jesus did for us. He died for us when we didn't deserve it so that we could have, you know, live with him forever. And if you truly, I keep thinking of that verse in Revelations also that talks about return to me, church, to your first love. People are returning to their first love. We get caught up in politics and who's offended with this and offended with that. But like, as a church, we can be united across the world that we're about a God that Jesus loves us, and we don't deserve salvation, but we get it anyways. And so when we approach the world in that humility, then that, you know, to walk justly, to love mercy, and to walk humbly with our God, whenever one of those things are off kilter, it should be an alarm bell in our mind. If I'm not walking justly, if I'm not loving mercy, and if I'm not humble, it says that's what God says is good to do. So when those things are off, we should check ourselves. And I had a friend tell me this, and I thought it was so helpful. It's better to do something now than nothing, and now is better than never, because it's never going to be perfect. And I just thought that was so great. Like, let's just get in and make our hands dirty and like figure out and learn each other and love each other. And I think it's a really opportunity for the church to spread the love of Jesus, because as white people, we can't, it's like going to be hard for white people to hold on to their passion for this, because they can slip easily back into our privilege where we don't have to worry about it anymore. So I think the really important part too is that if we can overcome some of this divide, the benefits for white people, they will be joined with a brotherhood of men that is so empowering and so powerful. And as women, we get to join with the sisterhood of women who can give us perspectives on the world that can change our lives. Like, getting to be a part of other cultures is how God designed us to be. It was supposed to be like, he loves different things. The Lord is the creator of, look at all the birds and all the trees and all the flowers and the fish in the sea. Like, he loves diversity. I hope that people can feel the grace to just try to start learning and to not give up and to keep reaching out to their neighbors.
Yeah. Well, I appreciate what your friend said, because I think a lot of times we don't want to make a mistake. It seems like we're walking on a road that we may not have tried to make any progress on before. We feel a little like we're walking on eggshells. We don't want to do the wrong thing. And I think, you know, looking at people's hearts and knowing that they are trying and they are listening. And we hope that that's what this podcast has done for listeners today. I know I've learned so much about the unique challenges that have faced you in your marriage and in your parenting, and I can be more sensitive to those now. A lot of times if we don't hear people's personal stories, we just have no idea what they're going through. And so I appreciate you being vulnerable and sharing, and I know that our listeners appreciate that too.
Absolutely, Katee. I just appreciate you being vulnerable, for opening up yourself. I appreciate you being a voice of truth, education, and hopefully healing for such a time as this.
It's been so special to be here. So special. So thank you.
All right. Well, we'll talk to you guys later.
All right. Bye, girls.
We're so happy you joined us today. You can find the show notes for this episode at midlifematterspodcast.com. Also, please tell a friend about the show and help them hit the free subscribe button on their favorite podcast app. Be sure to follow us on Instagram at Midlife Matters Podcast. That's where we post pictures and stories about all the things we talk about in each episode. Thanks for listening, and we'll see you next week.